Field spells. They've been around for a while. They've been a part of this game since the very beginning, offering every monster a home field advantage to fight on, and give normal monsters a hill to die on. Over the years, field spells have evolved to an insane degree, going from big stat boost to combo enablers to format defining to whatever hell Konami intended with Mystic Mind. And while many different archetypes welcome field spells into their core strategies, few did so quite like Triamid did. Debuting back in 2016, this small band of rocks challenged the game with their field spell focused strategy, and today we're going to be going over their short but meaningful lineup of cards. Naturally, for an archetype that's so centered around field spells, the first thing we need to talk about is the field spell in Triamids, and of course our Triangle Boys are coming out with a trifecta of field spells, being Triamid's Fortress, Cruiser, and King Golem. Triamid Fortress gives all rock monsters on the field 500 defense, and Triamid monsters can't be destroyed by card effects. And when sent from the field zone to the graveyard, you target Triamid in the graveyard and add it to your hand. Cruiser allows you to gain 500 life points whenever a rock monster gets normal summoned, and if a Triamid monster gets normal summoned, you can draw one card and discard another card. And if this card gets sent from the field zone to the graveyard, you can add a Triamid monster from your deck to the hand. Lastly, Triamid King Golem gives all rock monsters 500 attack points. With Triamid monsters battles, your opponent can't activate cards or effects until after damage step. And of course, if it's sent from the field to the graveyard, you can special summon a Triamid monster from the hand. But you can only use each of these secondary effects on all three of these field spells once per turn. With these three field spells, you get a pretty basic but pretty meaningful list of different effects. Fortress is going to protect all of your Triamid monsters from the nastiest of storms. Cruiser is definitely the best of the three, allowing you to get started up pretty early. Get yourself some draw power, get yourself some graveyard setup, get yourself some life points. It's the card you want to start up with more often than not in order to set up your board. And Triamid King Golem is therefore when it's time to stop playing defensive and go for the gold. One important thing to mention about these three field spells is their lines are being sent from the field to the grave, whether it's by your hand or your opponent's, is very key to the Triamid playstyle. You're going to want to cycle through these field spells as quickly as humanly possible. This being their core tenet, just want to go from one field to the next field spell, depending on the situation. Again, you want to start with Cruiser, and then when it's your opponent's turn, more often than not, you want to go into Fortress. When it's your turn, you head on into the King Golem. One thing I've always wondered about, with Triamids is why none of their field spells got to be turned into, like, I don't know, like a monster card. Kind of like how trap monsters are a thing. Why couldn't we have had field spell monsters? It would have been a nightmare for rulings, don't get me wrong, but I feel like with how much these Triamids are definitely referencing friggin' Pyramidus from Power Rangers Zeo, or possibly Metroplex with all the guns that we definitely see on here. It would have been really cool if Triamids had a field spell that was a monster to be like their boss monster. It would have been very interesting, would have been very neat. I really feel like Konami axed that idea because they really wanted Mech Knight Field Lockdown to become the next big thing. You're going to be playing 3 of each of these field spells in your typical Triamid deck, mostly because setting them off to the graveyard is so very important. It does get very bricky at times too. You could be tempted to play less than 3 of these, but you'll never want to play less than 3 Cruiser, and, you know, typically you just want to keep 3 Fortress, 3 King Golem anyway, just so that you always have the ability to replace one field spell with another in order to get the different effects going. Now that we've got ourselves the field spells situation all sorted out, let's start talking about the monsters. First up, we have Triamid Hunter, a level 3 Earth Rock monster with 1400 attack and 1100 defense, which if a field spell is face up on the field, you can normal summon a rock monster in addition to your normal summon set. You can only unfortunately gain this effect once per turn. However, once per turn during the opponent's turn, you target a Triamid field spell in the field zone, sending it off to the graveyard and activating a Triamid field spell from the deck with a different name, this here being a quick effect. Right off the bat, we got ourselves a great start to the deck, a monster that gives us additional summons, and the ability to get our field spells off the board. Again, this is a very key part of the strategy. It'll all make sense as we get towards the end. But we got ourselves Triamid Hunter. He's giving us additional normal summons. It's really great because it gives us the potential to just get our monsters out as quickly as possible, build up a nice repertoire of different big old monsters, that sort of shenanigans. You know, he's the guy who's bringing out all the... If you ever wondered who let the dogs out, it's Triamid Hunter, or whoever's playing Triamids and got the Hunters on the board. One thing to note about Triamid Hunter is that its secondary effect to switch field spells with others is something present on all of the main deck Triamids, barring their boss monster. So it's something that the archetype is ultimately they want to do. They just want to get those field spells cycled through. You want to be able to react to your opponent, get your field spells off the board, switch into the ones you need. Your opponent's trying to blow up your field spells or what have you. Just get that field spell off the field before your opponent does. It's like a very aggressive real estate agent. That's what Triamid Hunter and all the other Triamids be. Because you're just getting the field spells off the board, you're getting new ones on the board to react to what your opponent is trying to do to you. If your opponent tries to nuke you, you go for Fortress. If you want to stop them from using monster effects in the battle step, then there you go for King Golem. It's what you do. So, Triamid Hunter, it's a card you play as a 3 of, not just because Triamids is such a small archetype, but because it's really the best main deck Triamid monster for getting boards started up. And it works phenomenally well with Cruiser as well, gaining a life points and all the draws, all the kit and caboodle. Next up, we have Triamid Dancer, a level 3 Earth Rot monster with 600 attack, 1900 defense, which once per turn can target a Triamid card in the graveyard, shuffling it into the deck, and giving all Rot monsters you control 500 attack and defense. And much like Triamid Hunter, once per turn you can send a field spell from the field to the graveyard to activate a new one from the deck. Triamid Dancer is really great for going for OTKs and things of that nature. It's not a once per turn effect, so in theory you could infinitely loop the darn thing. As long as you have enough Triamid cards in the graveyard, but yeah, it's a small archetype, so it's not really infinite, but you can get to some pretty big numbers. If you can manage to loop Dancer, it is theoretically possible to do. This doesn't happen often, but you can get a good clean 1500 attack and defense on every monster you have. That's going to do you some big number damage. It's also got some good recovery attached to that number gain in effect. It's really good to just be able to recover your field spells so you can keep activating them over and over and over again. It's what you want to have in the deck like this, just the ability to send off the field spells to activate new ones, the ability to add back field spells so you can use them over and over again. It's all about that longevity. It's all about the statistics and the maths and all that stuff. I mean, look at this lady. She's got an abacus as a weapon. How badass do you have to be to smack someone over the head with an abacus? Dancer, another 3-off staple in this deck. Okay, it's not just because there's almost nothing in this deck, but because Triamid Dancer is going to allow you to get your monsters to be really big, and it gives you the recovery of your field spells, so you can keep on making them pyramids day in, day out, just like the ancient Egyptians. The third main deck monster we're looking at is Triamid's Master, which is a level 4 Earth Rock monster with 1800 attack and 700 defense. Once per turn can set a face-up Triamid card to control the graveyard, target a set card on the field and destroy it, and also it has the same field spell resetting effect as all the other Triamid monsters. Triamid Master it's spot removal, but it's really limited spot removal. I mean, look at Grandmark and what happened with him. Level 4 being an advantage in this deck with certain monsters. I mean, it allows you to make things like Gallant Granite. It's a nice thing to go into different, rank 4s that you might need. Babushka is definitely a thing if you find yourself feeling a little slow. But the problem with Master, ultimately, in this deck is that all the other Triamids are level 3, and he's the only level 4 one. So there's a bit of a clash there in terms of the monsters being, synergistic with each other. It makes sense he's the Triamid's Master, so he would have a higher level than the others. But ultimately, that does lead to some clashing of synergies there, that you're not going to always have the levels you want on the board to have Master do everything you'd like it to do. But with certain cards being added to the Rock Monsters repertoire, Triamid Master is actually fairly useful in the deck. It's again a 3-off staple because it's the last main deck monster barring the boss. You kind of have to run 3 of this thing until maybe that one golden day the Triamids get new support. So it's an alright monster. Again, its removal is kind of limited, but again, it plays into the whole theme of Triamids getting the field spells, cycling through them, activating new effects. Triamid Master does what it's supposed to do. It might not be the most impressive effect out of the 3, but it does what it needs to do. Asta? More like The Apprentice, am I right? Lastly, for the monster lineup, and yes, we are already at the end of the monster lineup, is Triamid Sphinx, a level 10 Earth Rot monster with 2500 attack and defense, which cannot be normal summoned or set, and must be special summoned by the effect of a Triamid card, and cannot be special summoned by other ways. If a face-up Triamid card or cards you control, except for itself, gets destroyed, you can special summon this card from the hand. And when you control another Triamid card, this card gets 500 attack and defense for every field spell card with a different name in your graveyard, and monsters your opponent controls cannot attack except to attack with a Sphinx. This is our ultimate payoff. A wall. It's a wall. It's just a big old wall. Now, granted, it's a rather nice big old wall. Triamid Sphinx with enough field spells in the grave can get rather large, because the thing about Sphinx you have to remember is that while this is Triamid's and we got 3 nice field spells, Sphinx does not exclusively limit his boosting to Triamid field spells. It can be any field spell you like. You can play whatever the heck you want, and that's going to give Sphinx a lot of more attack points. Gives you that incentive to run different field spells and different ratios of the original 3 field spells, just to make it so that Sphinx can get absolutely huge. Now, Sphinx might not be the most impressive in terms of, compared to like modern day boss monsters. Sphinx doesn't look like much at all. He doesn't have any protection of himself. He doesn't negate anything. He doesn't blow up stuff. He's just the guardian defender of the pyramids, which is ironic because they like to be blown up over and over again. But Sphinx will keep the monsters alive. That is what he's here to do. And it would have been nice if you could, if you had 2 Sphinxes, they would protect all your monsters, including themselves, but unfortunately that's not the case. Having 2 Sphinxes just means your opponent gets to pick which ones to punch in the face. But it does prevent the opponent from attacking directly. No little birds will soar over this Sphinx while this giant cat Sphinx, it's a Sphinx. Looks like a camel. It looks like some kind of weird lion camel thing. But no birds will fly over this Sphinx while he is on the job. And depending on the build you're going for, Sphinx, you play 1 or 2 of it, something like that. You don't want to max out on Sphinx so much. It's a card you kind of dig into and get prepared for it, because you need the field spells in the grave to make Sphinx big. So 1 or 2, generally what you'll want to do with this card. I would play it at 3, but in Master Duel, this has to be the one Triamid that's an ultra rare for whatever reason. But yeah, play whatever you are comfortable with. I would say 1. You can go 2, just don't go 3. Now, before we go into the last piece of the original lineup of Triamids, let's briefly segue into the one piece of support that Triamids ever got. That being the continuous spell card, Triamid Loading. But if the field spell is placed face up on the field, you can add a Triamid spell drop from the deck to the hand except for itself. If a face-up rot monster or monsters you control gets destroyed by an opponent's card effect, you special summon a Triamid monster with a different name from the deck. You can only use each of these effects once per turn. This card came out back in 2021. Shows up a little bit because it is, newer support, and it really does help out the Triamids in what they're trying to do. It's getting you more field spells on top of your field spells, so you can knock down one pyramid to build up another one. That is what the Triamids want to do, and loading helps you establish that very good. It's basically just a better version of terraforming, just getting out your field spells. That's what you need to do. And on top of it all, if any old rot monster gets destroyed, you can just replace it with a Triamid. And hey, it works bringing out Sphinx. That's what you want to do. You want to get out your penultimate boss monster. This card helps to do so. It actually allows you to run even more copies of Sphinx if you want to. It just makes it summoning Sphinx is much easier. Granted, it only summons from the deck, but there's nothing too terribly wrong with that. So, Triamid Loading, pretty good spell. It'll be even way better once Triamids actually get that line of support. Right now, it's pretty decent. It would have been even better if it was more of a combo enabler, but I can't really complain about this card. It's getting you field spells, it's getting monsters on the board. Pretty dang good. Triamid Dancers, you may not be raking in the big bucks yet just by standing there flossing in front of the Sphinx, but you know what? With time, Loading could become the most busted card in the entire archetype. Lastly for Triamids, and sadly this is the last card in the archetype for now, is Triamid Pulse, their continuous trap card that states that once per turn you can banish 2 cards from the graveyard, being any combination of rock, monsters, or field spells, to activate one of these 3 effects. You can target a face-up card on the field and destroy it, target a rot monster in the grave and special summon in defense mode, or target the 3 field spells in the graveyard to shuffle them to the deck and draw yourself another card. Pulse is the payoff that you get into getting all your field spells into the graveyard, on top of course, going for Sphinx. But this is the card that you use to interrupt your opponent, bring back your monsters for more plays, the works. Now, Pulse is pretty decent in that respect. You know, it's a bit costly, but it is allowing you to remove any basic card on the field, be it yours or your opponent. So there's a lot of, you know, different things you can do with that. The ultimate problem with Pulse, though, and ultimately the problem with Triamid's whole strategy, is that it takes a lot of setup for this all to work. You need to get your field spells cycled into the graveyard. If you're not replacing field spells basically every single turn, you are going to run out of resources very quickly for Pulse, and just in general, you need to be... If you don't have a field spell dropping into the graveyard both yours and your opponent's turn every turn, you're going to have yourselves a rough time with Triamid. You need to get those field spells going. And the ultimate weakness then with Pulse is you need to banish your field spells or your rocks to activate this card. Triamids don't have any sort of recovery for banished cards, and sadly there's not a lot of rock monsters that really like to be banished. In fact, there's pretty much no rock monsters that like to be banished. It's not really their thing. They like to be stuck in the ground, all sedimentary and all that good stuff. So while Triamid Pulse is a nice little bit of interrupt on your opponent, it's archetypal and all that, it's searchable, it may not be the most ideal card for the deck to have, considering that you don't really want your monsters to be banished. Because if they get banished, you can't do nothing with them, you know? It's not great. It's potentially useful, but the longer the duel goes on, the least useful this card is going to be. Now, unfortunately, that's all that Triamids currently have in their repertoire, a very, very compact 9-card archetype. So, not a lot to support them in of themselves. However, since their creation, different archetypes have come out into the world that really help out rocks in general. Specifically, things like Adamanticators, which are really great for field setup, good for swarming, good for synchros. I'm definitely looking at you, Naturia Beast. And really just good for keeping the Triamids on the board, and also just giving them some nice big beat sticks so that you can really mess with your opponent. You got things like Fossils, which, yeah, there's not a lot of big Triamids to go for like the bigger fusions, but they are rocks, and rocks together strong. So you got that sort of synergy. And you also have things like just generic Quacky Meirus. You got Barrier Statue of the Earth. It's cards that are just good in general for rocks to have. So while Triamids are still a pretty small archetype, there's some good cards that can really support them a lot. And I would even consider things like the Morganite line, potentially, especially combined with Triamid Hunter. Although you can't really do the Triamid thing in conjunction with that as well. So it's kind of a give and take thing. It really depends on what you want to go for. But it's nice to know that there are certainly some things that Triamids can do despite how little support that they have gotten. Triamids as a whole, a lot of good character in this deck. It's one of the few Egyptian-style decks in Yu-Gi-Oh!, which is ironic considering the lore starting up of Yu-Gi-Oh! In itself. You know, it's an earnest, eager-to-play sort of archetype. This is an archetype that just really wants to get out there and do its thing, you know? It's not about just omni-negating, omni-destroying everything your opponent does. It's not all about hand-trap hells or field spells that lock your opponent out of playing the game. It's just an archetype of Egyptian-style monsters that like to summon themselves out, switch up their field spells, build up into a nice big boss monster, go for the gold. A nice throwback to a simpler time in Yu-Gi-Oh! When that was the plan. You know, build a nice build up into a nice big boss monster that just showed off what your deck was all about. That's what it used to be like. So, Triamids really reflect that old time when the pyramids were young and giant sphinxes walked the land. They're a bit undervalued, and yet they're still very much a playable deck. You know, Triamids, plus the Adamanticators, plus the Fossils, plus the Quacky Meirus, plus the Block Dragon if it ever got on ban, which is never going to happen, allows these guys to do what they want to do. Just summon themselves out, go for the gold. And I would still really very much like it if Triamids would get a nice support run. It would have to be fairly sizable, though. Maybe a little bit bigger, like the Volcanic lineup of support cards. We need like a few, you know, at least 3 or 4 new main deck monsters, a couple spells. I don't know if we do the trap, but maybe that field spell boss monster would be nice to have in there. Something like that would be really great, and we can finally see Triamids as the powerhouse that they wanted to be. But thanks everybody a bunch for watching today's episode of Card Talks. I'm glad we got this one going, because I really do like Triamids. It's one of those old school cool archetypes that just does not get enough love. In the next episode, which will be out in another couple months, 2, 3 at the most, we are going to be taking a look at Shaddolls, because I've always wanted to talk about the shadowy Dollywallies. So, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed everything, don't forget to hit the like button. Consider subscribing as well. Leave a comment what you think about Triamid, and I'll see you guys again in the next one. Till next time, y'all take care.